Number 10. First appearance. While some may only know Atom Eve from the animated series, she's also one of the main characters in the comic series that inspired the show's existence and also seems to have informed much of its plot and character development thus far. Atom Eve made her first appearance in Invincible issue number 2 and appeared in the background in Mark's classroom in issue number 1. In issue number 2, Eve appears as part of the teen team and meets Invincible while he's fighting one of the Mauler twins. Later in issue number 0, Mark tells a story about Atom Eve to his then girlfriend, who he is revealing his secret identity to. He tells her that in his early days, with Atom Eve's help, they defeated a lesser villain together who was actually their physics teacher from school, Mr. Hiles. He had been putting bombs inside students and then blowing them up when they were inside malls. Mark theorizes that he must have hated malls. He also refers to Atom Eve as his superhero partner of sorts. Number 9. Teen Team. Atom Eve was an original member of the Teen Team, which was led by Robot. Her fellow teammates were Rexplode and Duplicate. As I said earlier, in the comics, the Teen Team and Atom Eve first meet Mark during a fight with one of the Mauler twins. In the animated series, Invincible and Atom Eve first meet instead in a fight against the Flaxon aliens. Afterwards, Mark approaches Atom Eve in her civilian identity of Samantha Wilkins at school, and she decides to help Mark with his training a little bit. The two become close, and at first, Mark appears to have feelings for Atom Eve until he learns that she is a boyfriend. Eve, however, would leave the team both in the comics and in the series because her boyfriend Rexplode cheated on her with Duplicate. She would then develop feelings for Mark in the animated series, but at that point, he'd kind of already moved on and was with Amber. Number 8. Voiced by. Robot might have a familiar voice for those listening to him speak in the animated series. In case you were wondering just who that voice belongs to, it's Zachary Quinto. When it comes to fandoms, Quinto is definitely no stranger. He played Spock in the rebooted Star Trek films from 2009, including the follow-ups Into Darkness and Beyond. Quinto is also well known for the roles he played in the anthology horror television series American Horror Story, and beyond that, he's also no stranger to superheroes either, landing one of his earlier major roles as Sylar in the television series Heroes. Remember Heroes? Remember that? That was a time. There was a time and a place. Number 7. New body. In the animated series, we learn about Robot's true body. Robot is not actually a robot, but merely a deformed genius who cannot move around or even breathe the air. The air to him is actually toxic and it burns him. But what he lacks in physical capability, he makes up for with his massive brain. With his genius intellect, he pilots and communicates through his robot body. He ultimately decides to get a human body and seeks help from the Mauler twins in creating a clone of his teammate Rexplode, maturing the body only until it is a young boy. He does all of this so that Monster Girl will not be alone, and in the end this becomes his new true body. Though it is just in truth a copy of the original mind that gave it life. He helps his original body to die, which is what he wanted so that his new version might live on in his place and finally experience life to the fullest. Needless to say, Rex was not very happy to learn that Robot had cloned him without his permission. Learn from Robot's mistakes. Before you clone someone, you should probably ask first. Number 6. Monster Girl. Monster Girl is another character that I am obsessed with, so you can only imagine how I feel about the relationship that blossoms between these two characters. Robot in the animated series feels a pull towards Monster Girl, as both of them have kind of curses in their own ways. Amanda has a literal curse placed upon her that means she'll de-age whenever she uses her powers, and Robot simply has an original body, but one that he can't live in fully, as the air around him is toxic, burning him. Instead, he must live inside a tube, experiencing life only through his robotic drones. Growing closer to Monster Girl, he makes a clone body that he moves his mind into, matching her age so she won't feel so alone. In the comics, he also tells her his real name, builds her a belt to help compensate for her curse, preventing her from de-aging when she transforms, and they also end up falling in love. Number 5. Rudolph Connors. Rudolph Connors is the real name of the hero we know as Robot. Rudolph was born deformed, but with a genius intellect, but we don't really know much else about his past. We don't know who his parents are, or where exactly he came from, or how he became a hero. He's not a teenager though, despite being a part of the teen team initially, and in fact its leader. In the animated series, when Rudolph creates the clone of Rex's body with his mind in it, he later reveals that he is actually in his 30s when it comes to his mind's age. Later on in the comic series, Robot would end up changing his name from Rudolph to Rex in his teammate and friend's memory, after Rexplode dies during the events of Invincible War. Sorry, I said there would be spoilers. Number 4. Robots. Plural. Robot doesn't just have one robot, he has multiple robots. We get to see just how many robot drones he has at his disposal and just how powerful Rudy can be because of this in the animated series when he takes on the Mauler twins. He needed the Mauler twins' help, both in the comics and in the animated series, to create his Rex clone, but in the end, he doesn't really plan on paying them like he promised, but instead plans on arresting them. Unhappy with this outcome, obviously, the Mauler twins plan to destroy Rudy's new body, the one they helped him to create. However, Robot has other plans. He ends up unleashing a bunch of his robotic drones on them, which he controls easily with his own mind. At one point, he even unleashes a giant robot version of himself, though in the end, he has to leave due to a global threat, causing him to be called back to the Guardians of the Globe home base, or headquarters, if you will. Number 3, alternate universe. Later on in the comic series, Mark ends up learning about the existence of the Invincible multiverse. Through this exploration, he ends up becoming trapped on an alternate Earth, where he finds out his alternate self is actually the Grand Regent of the Viltrum Empire, and is also the ruler of Earth. He ends up defeating this version of himself, but goes to Robot for help with how to get back home. Robot helps Mark, but also clones him so that they will still have a version of him there to rule. A version that Robot himself decides to pilot. Yep, instead of existing in a clone of Rex's body there, Robot then lives on as a clone of Mark, who rules the Viltrum Empire and Earth after the original Mark, or the one from the main continuity, I should say, leaves, returning to his own Earth. Number 2, ruler of the Flaxen Empire. Robot eventually goes on to become the ruler of the Flaxen Empire, if you can believe it. He and Monster Girl find themselves trapped in the Flaxen dimension and end up being captured. But after a certain amount of time, the Flaxens give up trying to dissect them. Monster Girl ends up as a gladiator, serving the Emperor later on as his personal champion, while Robot spends his time in captivity, attempting to learn more about the Flaxen language and culture, and devising a plan to overthrow the Emperor. It takes a long time, like more than 300 years, but eventually Robot ends up becoming the leader of a rebellion. Eventually the rebels win, defeating the Empire. After all these years being trapped there, Robot finds himself even more in love with Monster Girl than he was prior. Elected as Emperor, he chooses Monster Girl to rule by his side. The two, in love, decide to stay in the Flaxen Empire and help to turn it into a place that will never threaten Earth again. Eventually, Monster Girl suggests that although they are doing great things for the Flaxen Empire, were they to return home, they could also do good for Earth. And Robot agrees, and the two end up finding a way back home. During their time in the Flaxen dimension, their aging was dramatically slowed, and as time passes differently on Earth, they have barely aged, and much less time has passed on Earth when they return. So yeah, it hasn't been like 300 years on Earth, in case you were wondering. Number 1, world domination. Monster Girl did end up convincing Robot that their return to Earth would be a good idea, and even that there was so much more good that they could do for Earth besides. And Robot listened to this idea and adopted it. The only problem for him was he would need complete control of Earth to be as effective as possible about bringing about this change, which meant turning on a lot of other heroes who would stand in his way, even his love, Monster Girl. He had hoped Monster Girl would stand by his side as she did during their time together in the Flaxen dimension, but in the end, Monster Girl was shocked to find out Robot's plan to remove Earth's heroes. Realizing she wouldn't join him, Robot ejects Monster Girl out into space. She is later rescued, but not by Robot. In the end, Robot ends up actually winning and is successful in taking over Earth, causing Mark to leave the planet, as while he agrees that Robot is an excellent ruler, he disagrees with the methods that he used to take over the planet. Which is, yeah, pretty fair, because, pretty rough methods there, Robot. Number 10, first appearance. Robot makes his first appearance in issue number 2 of Invincible. Here, Robot appears as a member of the team who end up meeting Mark on his first flight out, when he attempts to apprehend one of the Mauler twins. The team also arrives to deal with that Mauler twin. Much to Robot's dismay, though, Rex ruins the element of surprise by firing one of his charged objects at the pair fighting, Mark and the Mauler twin, and asking who started it first. Rex later apologizes after being called out and responds that he thought it was a good idea at the time. Robot then asks Rex to leave the good ideas up to him. Robot is the leader of the team and introduces his team to Mark, learning in exchange that Mark's name is Invincible, which Robot calls cute. There's all that sass I was talking about. Number 9, created by... Like most characters from Invincible, Robot was created by Robert Kirkman and Cory Walker. Or should I say Cory Walker and Robert Kirkman? Kirkman himself later claimed that Robot was mainly Walker's idea and that he himself had just provided the know-it-all personality and likely much of the sass for the character, but that Walker had been the one to come up with the idea for that character. Number 8. Make the world you want to live in. In the animated series, we see Adam Eve leave the team and adopt the mantra, make the world you want to live in. Her trajectory as a hero is similar in the comics. Instead of living in complete seclusion and protecting the Earth from more natural-based threats than supervillains, she actually leaves the US and goes abroad, becoming involved in aid work. Samantha believed she could do more good that way than acting as a hero, but she does occasionally team up with superheroes and super teams thereafter to help them in the future against intergalactic or serious global threats. Number 7. Her powers. Adam Eve's powers allow her to manipulate matter at a subatomic level. Through the manipulation of atoms, she has also exhibited other powers such as telekinesis, flight, energy blasts, energy constructs, and the ability to control and manipulate nature and the elements. And she's also immortal. Did I mention that one? Not only does she possess enhanced healing abilities, but whenever she dies of old age, she returns to life, no longer old, but back as she was in her adult prime. As both we and Eve herself discover in the final issue of Invincible, issue 144. Everyone was surprised about that one, Eve included. Number 6. William. After Samantha ends things with fellow hero Rex Splode, she actually ends up dating Mark's best friend, William, for a while. In case you're thinking, but wait, isn't William gay? Yes, he is still very gay in the comics, but his interest in Eve has more to do with her powers, so the two end up dating for a short while. She ultimately ends up breaking up with William because she finds him kind of annoying and sensing that he isn't really as much attracted to her as he is just into her powers. So it's only really a brief relationship, not even really a romance at all. She and William go on a double date with Mark and Amber though in the comics. It seems for Eve this may have also been a good relationship and opportunity for allowing her to be closer to Mark in terms of what she got out of it. After she and William break up, she ends up retiring from being a superhero and uses her abilities to help more with aid work instead. Number 5. Invincible. Although Invincible starts out dating Amber both in the comics and the animated series, he and Samantha both eventually end up together. Adam Eve returns for a time from aid work and ends up teaming up with Invincible to fight Dr. Seismic in the comics, and a little while after this fight, the two end up together, kissing each other and both confirming their romantic feelings for one another. Mark and Samantha in the comics would also end up having a child together, a daughter named Tara. Number 4. Invincible Inc. Samantha and Mark would later start a company together and become not just lovers, but also business partners. Their company was called Invincible Inc. and was a private security firm. People would call on them when they needed security help, specifically when they wanted or needed Invincible to act as their muscle. So it was both profitable, but then also just good for helping the world. It was basically taking the superhero lifestyle and turning it into a career, with Invincible kind of being the main security person, the main muscle, and Adam Eve acting as his manager. Many of the calls that Adam Eve sent Mark on were all about helping people. When Mark wasn't available, another hero known as Bulletproof would also help out. Bulletproof would later also take on the mantle of Invincible. In fact, it was kind of because he was filling in for Mark that he ended up taking that mantle to begin with. Number 3. The power of pink. Adam Eve's costume is easily recognizable for its bright pink color. Not only does it celebrate Adam Eve's identity as a female, but it also matches with the color of her powers, which are also pink. Adam Eve also designed her costume herself, and she actually uses her matter manipulation powers to create it every time she needs to go somewhere and do something heroic. She just takes her clothes, rearranges the atoms, and voila, she has her costume. Adam Eve shares this color with lots of other female superheroes from various different universes and comic book publishers. On our most powerful Invincible characters list, I compared Adam Eve to Invisible Woman in terms of what kinds of powers she has. And while the two are comparable, there are a few other female superheroes who could also be compared to Adam Eve, not just based on their powers, but also based on the color that goes with them. When I think pink powers, I think initially of Kimberly from the Power Rangers, the original Pink Ranger, but when it comes to Adam Eve, I think of other notable heroes from Marvel like Psylocke and of course Jean Grey. Adam Eve can make energy constructs and can manipulate atoms. Both of these powers connect to both of those heroes. Though at the end of the day, while Adam Eve may take inspiration from lots of characters who have come before her, she also feels 100% original. which is why I love her. Number 2, her origins. While it might just seem like Samantha is another hero who just happened upon her powers, it's revealed that she was actually made to become a superpowered being. The government actually made her, and she was intended to be a genetically engineered bioweapon. Samantha was later then raised to think she was just a normal teenage girl growing up in a home with regular parents. But really, she was man, and more specifically government, made to become a powerful government weapon and agent. Her mother did not survive childbirth, and her father, who was a scientist who had helped to create her, swapped the baby with the Wilkins couple stillborn to keep her out of the hands of the government. So they made the government think that she was stillborn. We'll have to wait to see if the show follows this path for her origins or adds its own twist. As of episode 7, we are simply made to believe that Adam Eve is just a teenage girl who happened to develop superpowers. But fans of the comics know there is much more behind that story. Number 1, Arias Brandyworth. Arias Brandyworth was the name of the scientist who helped to create Adam Eve. He was kind of like her biological father. Samantha grew up believing her parents were Betsy and Adam Wilkins and was completely unaware of her powers as a child. As she grew, she began to demonstrate a natural intelligence, which apparently was actually a result of her powers, and eventually she also exhibited the ability to deconstruct and reconstruct atoms at will. In the animated series, her father Adam begs Samantha to give up her work being a hero and work towards living a normal life instead, so that she'll be more safe. However, in the comics, Brandyworth had been keeping an eye on Samantha since he had swapped her at birth. When her powers began to manifest, it was him who was the one to warn her against using them.
Coming in at number 10, we've got Monster Girl. Once known as Monster Woman, this superhero has abilities that remind me a bit of Benjamin Button meets the Incredible Hulk. You heard me right. We've got a shapeshifter who can transform into an insanely powerful, monstrous version of herself, but each time she does it, she de-ages a little bit. So after a whole bunch of fights, the once adult hero became a teen who was then progressively become even younger. What some folks will do to fight crime. Although I'd say some people wouldn't see that reverse lifespan as such a bad thing, right? Especially if at some point you could hang up your transforming days and just live life out as a younger version of yourself. Her origin story is especially weird too. She had at one point been on a class trip to Europe soaking in the culture. During this expedition, she met a boy and fell in love, eventually sleeping with him. His grandmother saw them do the deed and did not approve. Instead of yelling at her grandson or telling the monster girl to get out of town, she decided to curse her instead. By casting a spell on a strand of her hair, the old woman imbued Monster Girl with her troll-like transformative appearance. As a young lass, this really upset her, especially as she could not control her powers at first. These days, the transformation is better understood and she has more refined control over it. Weirder still, she managed to mate with a female Flaxen while in her monster form, who would later give birth to a child. There's a lot going on, obviously. Coming in at number 9, we've got Donald Ferguson. Now, who does this guy remind you of? Be honest, I want to gauge your genuine reaction. I'll give you a few seconds to lock in your answer. Alright? He looks like Bobby Hill. Yep, now you'll never be able to look at this high-ranking member of the Global Defense Agency the same way again. Hell, it could very well be the son of Hank and Peggy Hill, all grown up and with some cybernetic enhancements and an identity change. The haircut, the way he carries himself, everything. Plus, get this, there's an episode of King of the Hill where Bobby is reading a knockoff Invincible comic called Invincible. I don't know if that means King of the Hill exists in an alternate version of our current universe or if they're in the Invincible universe and somebody's made a comic subtly ripping off some heroes. Either way, Ferguson raises a lot of questions and gives a lot of folks weird deja vu. And also he's full of robotic weapons and wants to karate chop kaiju. Good for him.
Number 8, Titan. Titan is the character that we first see Invincible run into and beat up when he first gets his powers in the animated series. But just because Mark beats him straight out of the gate doesn't mean you should dismiss this villain. Later on in the series and also the comics, Titan would deceive Invincible. In the animated series, we see him come to Invincible asking for help. He claims he wants out of his life as a criminal, wanting to go straight for his family. He asked for Invincible's help in defeating Machine Head so that he can be free. But just like in the comics, after Machine Head is defeated, Titan steps in to take his place as the new ruler of Machine Head's criminal empire. His powers grant him enhanced strength and endurance, allowing him to encase his body in rock. But what really makes him powerful is his ability to manipulate others into doing his bidding. Granted, he probably will be a better crime lord than Machine Head. I mean, he's gotta be, right? Number 7. Dinosaurus. Dinosaurus is David Anders, who has the power to turn into, you guessed it, a dinosaur, specifically resembling a humanoid T-Rex. This change comes upon him whenever he feels a sense of indifference towards something. While in his Dinosaurus form, David is granted superhuman levels of strength, toughness, and agility. He also is smarter in his dino form, often using his genius to outsmart his opponent, or to manipulate them. His genius intellect also kind of gives him a god complex as well, making him obsessed with solving humanity's problems, but at any cost. Whenever he switches back to his human self, any injuries he has sustained also heal instantly. Number 6. Duplicate. Duplicate is one of the members of the new Guardians of the Globe. Her abilities are pretty cool and allow her to create an unlimited number of duplicates of herself. Her powers are actually the result of an ancient Chinese curse and were meant to cause her family to go insane. Her father actually gave up his children for adoption after he learned that both she and her brother Paul both had this ability. Having children that could multiply at will would be very stressful. Kate and Paul would work towards gaining better control over their powers and would use them to fight crime together as a superhero duo, with Paul taking up the name Multi-Paul. Later, he would become a villain while Kate would remain a hero. Kate would go on to join the Teen Team and later the Guardians of the Globe. Number 5. Powerplex. Powerplex almost succeeded in defeating Mark and became one of his arch nemeses. This is because during a fight that Invincible and Omni-Man were having, the destruction they caused killed Powerplex's sister. Scott's powers allow him to absorb energy, however, it is possible to overload him. At one point, Scott attempts to attract Invincible's attention, but using his wife and son as bait, asking them to pretend to be his hostages. Mark arrives and attempts to save them, getting in a fight with Powerplex, aka Scott Duval, who reveals the real reason for wanting to fight Invincible. When Invincible punches him, however, Powerplex overloads, exploding with excess energy. This explosion ends up killing his son and wife, who were playing hostage for him. Devastated at their deaths, this only makes Scott hate Mark even more, as he also now blames Invincible for their deaths as well. Number 4. Tech Jacket. Tech Jacket is a member of the Guardians of the Globe. He ends up joining the Invincible stable of characters later on in the comic series, becoming a recurring character, but actually first appears in his own spin-off series based in that universe, self-titled Tech Jacket. Tech Jacket is Zach Thompson, a hero who received an alien tech jacket after encountering a crashed spaceship and a dying alien. That alien's name was Kelda, and they belong to a physically fragile and weaker race of aliens known as the Geldarians. To compensate, they created the Tech Jacket for every member of their race to wear. The Tech Jacket is a permanent item of clothing that is generally never removed. It grants Zack enhanced speed, strength, stamina, and agility. It can create energy blasts and weapons for the user to wield. It can also create force fields and can clean and provide sustenance to its user when needed. If you are looking to the main Invincible series for Tech Jacket, check out issues 71 to 78. He appears in that little run of issues. He's also in a few other issues, but that's like a whole run you could read. Number 3, Conquest. Up until this point in the comics, Conquest was one of the scariest villains we had ever encountered, and one of the strongest, most durable Viltrumites we had yet to meet. Conquest is an older Viltrumite, believed to be even older than Mark's dad, Nolan, and Nolan is like thousands of years old. An experienced warrior, Conquest almost straight up murdered Adam Eve and Invincible, as well as Mark's brother Oliver, Kid Omni-Man. Even when Invincible got the upper hand in their fight, and he thought the Conquest was dead, with his face being headbutted by Mark until it was basically unrecognizable, it still turned out that he had somehow survived. The more bloody and brutal a fight gets, the more Conquest seems to actually enjoy it. He is crazy. Number 2, Tara. Tara is the daughter of Adam Eve and Invincible. She was born on Earth but would move to Telestria with her parents. Because she is part Viltrumite, she will likely grow up to be even stronger than her father who came before her, as this is usually the way with Viltrumites. This means that Tara has the potential to become stronger than both her father, grandfather, and of course anyone that they themselves have seemed capable of beating in battle. She is shown to have the natural superpowers and abilities of your average Viltrumite. But like I said, she has the potential for being one of the strongest. Number 1, Thrag. Or is it Throg? I mean, I haven't heard it said out loud yet, so Thrag or Throg, which one do we want to go with? Guess we'll kind of have to wait to find out when he shows up in the show. whenever that happens. Thrag is the Grand Regent of the Viltrumite Empire, making them basically the ruler and, in effect, emperor, or the equivalent. He is a villain who initially wants Mark and his father Nolan dead. Thrag battles them on Earth and is briefly interrupted by Battle Beast. He is known for being the strongest Viltrumite and is also thousands of years old, having fought in the Viltrumite Civil War after the death of their emperor Argal. Thrag would end up being given the title of Grand Regent. He attempts to make a deal with Mark and Nolan that Viltrumites will take up residence on Earth as undercover aliens to help bolster the much depleted population of Viltrumites. However, he goes back on this deal of peace in exchange for cohabitation after he learns that Nolan was Argal's son and that Mark is therefore the heir to the throne, fighting to preserve his title. In the end, he is defeated, but only after everyone basically bands together and helps that to happen. Thrag still proves how powerful he is when he ends up being the one to defeat Battle Beast after days of battling with him, with both continuing to fight while disemboweled. Wow. Number 10, War Woman. War Woman takes a bit of inspiration from Thor and a little bit of inspiration from Wonder Woman. She is a hero who comes from another more fantastical world. Due to her more divine heritage, she is amazingly strong and durable. We didn't see her as much in the comics, but in the show, she appears as a force to be reckoned with. War Woman was an original member of the Guardians of the Globe, a superhero team that came from all over the world. In the show, in her everyday secret identity, War Woman posed as Holly and was the head of a major corporation in Boston. She hoped to use her company as well to make the world a better place. Even when she wasn't in her hero persona, she was striving to be a hero. Number 9, Damien Darkblood. Damien Darkblood was only a minor character in the comics, appearing in only a handful of issues in the main Invincible series. Darkblood is a mysterious demon detective. Think Hellboy meets John Constantine with a little bit of Spawn or Damon Hellstrom mixed in. Solving cases on Earth gives him time away from Hell and seems to be his way of kind of atoning for his past, or his demon heritage, or perhaps lessening his sentence in Hell. He has some demon-based powers that seem to allow him to appear in the darkness, lurk in the shadows potentially unseen, see through maybe the darkness, and perhaps even teleport. He also seems to have a sixth sense for evil, but mostly he is known as a skilled investigator. His obsession with the truth also reminds me a bit of Rorschach, and he seems to be determined to uncover the truth in a very particular case, and once uncovered to gather enough evidence to expose this truth to the world. Number 8, Donald Ferguson. While Donald Ferguson might appear super squishy in the animated series, in the comics he's actually not so easy to defeat. In fact, Donald Ferguson is a cyborg, so that scene where Omni-Man grabs his spine, it likely wouldn't have gone down quite like that. Considering that Donald blew himself up in the show, it's unclear as to whether or not we'll get to see the cyborg version that we're used to. Probably not. In the comics, he actually ends up making it through to pretty much the end. Ferguson is mostly metal despite his appearance. You might not know it to look at him because he usually wears a synthetic skin over the metal parts that aren't on display. He usually uses his arms to fight, turning them into big guns or pulsar cannons. Number 7, Brit. Brit is kind of like a combination of Captain America and Luke Cage. He's got a military background and de-accelerated aging, as well as impenetrable skin. He also has a half-sister who is just about as badass and is also kinda super weird, who shares his name but spells it differently. Her name is Brittany. Brit's name is Brittany. There are a lot of Brittany's in his family, actually. Many Brittany's. Brit had 3 series of his own: Brit Cold Death, and Brit Red, White, Black, and Blue, but also appeared in Guarding the Globe Volume 1 from the Invincible universe. Brit also appeared more regularly in the Invincible series later on, but made his first appearance in there as early as issue 11. Number 6, Shrinking Ray. Shrinking Ray or Shrinking Ray? Shrinking Ray appears both in the comics and in the animated series, though the 2 versions of the characters are a little different from one another. In the comics, Shrinking Ray is a man and a hero whose origins remains a mystery. It is, however, rumored that Ray was an intern at Microorganics Limited who received his powers following an accident that took place there. There was apparently an intern named Ray that went missing after that accident. In the animated series, Ray is a woman whose powers are the same as her comic book counterpart. They both possess powers that allow them to change size at will, like Ant-Man or the Atom. Ray was considered in the comics to be a kind of obscure hero initially, but eventually he made his way onto the Guardians of the Globe, proving himself. However, Ray would continue to remain insecure about his power set in comparison to some of the other grander powers that his teammates possessed. Number 5, Brittany. Brittany is even stronger than her half-brother. She made her first appearance in issue 48 of Invincible, but really where she shines is in Britt's series, in my opinion. There we get to see what she is really capable of. Brittany has powers similar to her brother's. She has superhuman strength, invulnerable skin, and a much slower aging process. Brittany has also been shown to have a very close connection to her half-brother. At one point, when he is presumed dead, she looks at the skeletal remains that were retrieved and believed to be his, licks the skull, and is able to tell that it isn't her brother. That's really weird. She can also survive at extremely low temperatures. Number 4, Doc Seismic. Doc Seismic might not have survived till the end in the comics, but he had a good run. And odds are good if you thought that was the last that you would see of him in the animated series, that we were all misled there, and he will be back. In fact, in the comics, Dr. Seismic even wins the day, and not against any B or D-list heroes either. Invincible and Atom Eve themselves respond to his threat, and even they get their butts whooped. If you want to check out how Doc wins, check out issue 48. This was a villain that when I first saw him in the animated series, I immediately became a fan. He's just so outlandish, so ridiculous, but in that perfect comic book villain way, where you know he'll likely end up winning the day almost because of his flair for the dramatic. As someone who also has a flair for the dramatic, I can get behind it. Number 3, Rexplode. I mean, who doesn't love a Gambit-inspired hero, am I right? With just a dash of Jubilee mixed in. See, as an example, the fireworks display that Rex sets off in an attempt to get Eve's attention and apologize after cheating on her. Rex might not always be the most bright, kind, or approachable of the bunch, but at the end of the day, his heart is in the right place and he truly is a hero. Initially, he and Eve spent time together on the run, which was what brought them together to begin with. Rex's powers allow him to charge objects, turning them into explosives. He typically fights with smaller objects so that these explosions are more controlled. But during the events of Invincible War, he would end up giving his life against a threat so great that it seemed it would be impossible for the heroes to win the day. He supercharges his skeleton, creating a massive explosion that would save the day, but cost him his life. Sure, he died, but having the conviction to follow through with a plan like that, in addition to his abilities, which I think are pretty cool, makes him pretty powerful in my books. Number 2, Black Samson. Black Samson originally had superpowers that granted him superhuman strength, endurance, and durability, and was an original member of the Guardians of the Globe. However, after he lost his powers, he was kicked off of the team. Yearning to return to a life of heroism, he had Art make him a suit which would allow him to hopefully one day return, augmenting his abilities. Initially, it was believed that Black Samson could have killed the Guardians, seeking revenge for them kicking him off of the team, but this was later disproved as Samson had an alibi and had been home at the time of their death. Samson would later use his suit to get himself a place back on the Guardians of the Globe team when Robot was assembling the new squad. During the fight against Machine Head, Samson was gravely injured and would end up comatose. However, when he awoke, his superpowers had returned to him and were actually even more powerful than before, meaning that he no longer needed to wear his suit. His power levels were way higher than normal when he first awoke, allowing him to turn the tides in the fight against the villain Omnipotus. Number 1, Bulletproof. Bulletproof initially tried out for the Guardians of the Globe, but he actually didn't make the cut. However, he'd later be added to the team because of his flight powers. Bulletproof is Zandale Randolph, who got his powers because of his twin brother Tyrone's obsession with superpowers. Tyrone drugged his brother and decided to experiment on him because his genes were so similar to his own, with them being identical twins. Tyrone would be successful in giving his brother powers, but would die in the process. Zandale's powers make him virtually invincible. He can absorb energy, has enhanced healing, superhuman strength, speed, and endurance. He is also capable of interstellar flight. He is invulnerable to energy-based attacks, including kinetic energy-based attacks. He took the name Bulletproof because, well, he is that. But he would later go on to also take up Mark's mantle of Invincible, which I think is also pretty appropriate. Number 10, First Appearance. Monster Girl first appears in Invincible issue number 9. Her appearance is similar to the show. She shows up to try out for the new Guardians of the Globe team, which is being led by Robot. However, the competition seems a lot more fierce in the comics in comparison, with tons and tons of established and potential heroes showing up for tryouts. Apparently, the gig pays really well. Also, who doesn't want to be on the Earth's premier superhero team? Am I right? Monster Girl introduces herself to Rexplode, who is making fun of of her for being, or appearing to be, a little girl. She and Rex get into a fight that Invincible has to come in and split up. Invincible apologizes for hitting Monster Girl after seeing her transform back into her human form, not knowing that she was, a little girl before he intervened. But Monster Girl shrugs it off, saying that she can't get hurt while in her monster form anyways, and she simply asks anyone if they have a cigarette, revealing right off the bat that she is definitely not what she seems. And friends, before we move on to this next point, if you are enjoying this list and you want more lists like it, please let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Seriously, it really does help us out here at the channel, and thank you if you've already clicked like. Thank you. Number 9. Voiced by. Monster Girl is voiced by none other than Grey Griffin in the Invincible animated series. But that's not everyone that Griffin provides a voice for in the series. She also voices Shrinking Ray as well, another member of the new Guardians of the Globe, who actually is a gender-swapped version of the same character from the comics. You might recognize Grey Griffin as a voice for many different well-known and amazing animated shows as well. She is a prominent voice actor who sometimes also goes by her legal name of Grey DeLisle, and otherwise is credited as Grey Griffin. Grey provided the voice for Vicky in Fairly Odd Parents, Mandy in The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, I love that show, Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender, Sam from Danny Phantom, as well as Frankie, the Duchess, and Goo from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, one of my personal all-time favorite animated series. I love Foster's. That is an impressive amount of 5-star voice work. So, if you heard her voice and you were like, does that sound familiar? First of all, it probably doesn't quite sound familiar because I feel like she's such a good voice actor. She's got that camouflage thing going on. But yeah, she's awesome. Number 8, Monster Girl. And I'm not just putting her on this list because her name is also Amanda. Monster Girl is a powerful character who can change into an intensely powerful Hulk-like monster. The problem? It de-ages her a bit every time she transforms. This is because Monster Girl's powers were given to her by a curse. Initially, her powers were hard for her to control, but with training and practice, she was able to control her transformations, choosing when she wanted to transform. In her monster form, she has superhuman strength and durability. She also becomes a massive beast, and the younger she becomes, actually, the more massive her beast form is. So if she is a young girl and transforms into her beast form, it's going to be larger than if she were to transform into a beast as an older woman. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn even more about Invincible, please let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Please do it. I really want to talk about more Invincible. Number 7, Alan. Alan is a bureaucratic alien who is a champion evaluation officer. He flies around to planets to make sure registered guardians there are prepared for potential lesser intergalactic threats. For many years, he has been coming to Earth to battle Omni-Man under the notion that he was doing his job and his duty. He later discovered that he may have misunderstood some information and went to the wrong planet for years to check in. Oops. Alan belongs to the Unipan race. As such, he possesses the powers of telepathy, superhuman strength, endurance, and speed. He can even evolve to become stronger upon defeat, allowing him to adapt to his opponents so that he can match or beat them in terms of their power levels. Alan, of course, is also capable of flying through space, which is how he travels from planet to planet, checking in on his assigned guardians. Number 6, Robot. Robot appears to be an AI. He is a robotic being who is gifted with a genius-level intellect and a barrage of powers related to his cybernetic body. He is a skilled leader and is very good at scientific analysis. If there is a problem that needs solving, especially if it pertains to the field of science, Robot can likely find the answer and provide a solution, and do it all in a very timely manner. Robot also, for a time in the comics, had an army of drones that he could call upon and bend to his will, using them to aid his team in battle. Robot is perfectly voiced by Zachary Quinto in the Amazon Prime series, and honestly, I think he might be my favorite character of those that we've seen so far in that animated series. Well, actually, he's tied with Debbie, Mark's mom, who I'm also a pretty big fan of. I do love Debbie. I really wanted to put Debbie on this list. I was very tempted to put her at my number 1 spot, but she doesn't actually have powers, so but she's very strong of heart and of mind, I feel. Number 5, the Immortal. The Immortal is one of the initial members that we meet who belongs to the Guardians of the Globe. He's got a little bit of a Vandal Savage or Old Guard feel, but his only power isn't just his immortality, though it's probably his greatest power. He can fly, is capable of intergalactic travel, and has superhuman strength, speed, durability, and endurance. The Immortal has been alive for thousands of years, and although he's tried to die in the past, it's pretty much impossible. He can heal from almost all wounds, no matter how great or how severe. Based on what we know about Immortal, he can come back from pretty much anything, but just how much damage is even too much damage for him? Number 4, Atom Eve. Atom Eve definitely has to be one of the strongest ones out there. Her powers are similar to that of Marvel's Invisible Woman, minus the invisible part. But she also kind of gives me a bit of a Starfire feel, even though she is not an alien like Corey is. Atom Eve's real name is Samantha Eve Wilkins. When we first meet her in the animated series, she's the girlfriend of fellow teammate Rexplode. The two heroes work together as members of a more minor superhero team known as the Teen Team. And she is one of the heroes besides Omni-Man who offers to mentor Invincible. Her powers allow her to manipulate energy at a subatomic level, either organic or inorganic. She uses this ability to give herself powers in the form of flight, force fields, energy blasts, telekinesis, and energy constructs. She also is extremely hard to permanently kill. I don't want to give anything away, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Number 3, Omni-Man. Omni-Man is obviously one of the strongest characters that we see in the series and in the show. He's built up to be that way, and he remains that way pretty much throughout. Omni-Man is an alien known as a Viltrumite, who hailed from the planet Viltrum. In case any of this is sounding familiar to you, yeah, he's pretty much the invincible version of DC's Superman. But the great thing about this series is that it takes archetypal heroes like Superman that you think you know and kind of offers you a different perspective on them. And Omni-Man is definitely that. During the beginning of the series, we learn that Omni-Man is Invincible's dad, and we come to see him as an all-powerful hero. He claims to have come to Earth to become its sworn protector, and shortly after arriving here, he met and fell in love with Debbie, Mark's mother, and then he had Mark. Omni-Man is extremely strong, fast, durable, and tough. He can fly, ages slower, can travel through space, he's invulnerable, his skin basically impenetrable, and he has enhanced healing, which allows him to bounce back more quickly than humans from wounds that would typically be deemed life-threatening. Number 2, Invincible. While Invincible might seem kinda inexperienced now where we're at in the show, it's established in the Invincible universe in the comics that Viltrumites get stronger throughout the familial generations. This means that in the comics, Mark is the one that inevitably ends up on top when it comes to who has more power than who. Of course, he still has a lot of work to do in the Amazon Prime show when it comes to tapping into that power and finding the best way to utilize it. But even as a beginner, he's still very much a force to be reckoned with, which is definitely acknowledged by his fellow supers around him. And while you might point to the fact that he is the son of both Omni-Man and Debbie, so he's half human, that does not override the genetic traits of his dad's side. Invincible will likely continue to get stronger as the show progresses, just like he did in the comics. I wonder if this version of him will also discover the multiverse. And will he see the comic version of him through it? Be like, oh, that's me, but like in Image Comics as opposed to the show. That'd be cute. Number 1, Battle Beast. What hero could be stronger than Invincible, whom the series and show are both named after, you ask? Well, this entry on the list isn't a hero at all, actually. Battle Beast, also known as Thok, is a villain who has been shown as being powerful enough to kick Invincible's butt and even take on several Viltrumites at once. Battle Beast is an intergalactic warrior who comes from a race of people known for their prowess in battle. He started out as the guardian of a planet, being the fiercest warrior there, but eventually became obsessed with finding a worthy opponent who could defeat him. So he ventured out into the galaxy looking for that worthy opponent on distant worlds, wreaking havoc on each one as he searched, and would find no one strong and skilled enough to defeat him. Or would he? Number 10, Isotope. Teleportation has always been for me one of the strongest powers that exist in the comics. Isotope is no exception there. What he lacks probably is his own drive and the intelligence needed to be a leader himself. It is for this reason that we likely see him playing second fiddle to Machine Head in the animated series. He seems to prefer to be more of a supervillain's lackey than a supervillain in his own right. Still, without him, Machine Head doesn't have the getaway he needs, meaning that he's kinda trapped. And Isotope is still a smart enough villain to know when it's a good idea to abandon ship, which is why he decided to ally himself with Titan instead of Machine Head going forward. Number 9, Cecil Stedman. Cecil might only be a human, but he's still a pretty smart human. One who knows when to make moves and how to stack the deck in his favor. He is the one who tells the Guardians of the Globe what to do, not their leader so much as just their boss. His only power comes from tech in the animated series, which allows him to teleport using bracelets. Surprisingly, Cecil is unafraid to face supervillains and superheroes who are far more powerful than him in terms of what he is capable of. You may have noticed that he seems to have a bunch of small scars on his lip or near his lip in the animated series. In the comics, we learn that this is because years ago, as a government agent, while on a mission, he was exposed to a flesh-eating gas. He was saved and then had the skin that had been eaten away replaced, save for that one spot to remind him of how bad he'd messed up. While his methods are sometimes questionable, there is nothing Cecil wouldn't sacrifice to try and save the world.
Coming at number 8, we've got Best Tiger. Not Good Tiger, Best Tiger. What an absolute legend. A play on the blind swordsman, Best Tiger wears a blindfold over his eyes whenever he fights crime. And he is always fighting crime. Even if it doesn't look like he's fighting crime, he's fighting crime. This green and black clad gunslinger can hit any target from pretty much any distance with little to no effort. He once took out 12 targets with one ricocheting bullet. He's just so very intense. It's hard to say what his personality is at all because he's so committed to taking out bad guys and solving mysteries. It seems to be all he does, which for all the good guys tends to be pretty helpful. However, he's not the most fun to hang out with, nor does he provide too much in the way of interesting character development. But what he can do is determine that someone was taken over by a ghostly villain by the sound of wind whistling through her freshly shaved pits. Nobody does it like Best Tiger, and that's probably for the best. As long as he keeps doing Best Tiger stuff anyways. Coming in number 7, we've got Space Racer. There aren't too many folks out there with weapons that can kill Viltrumites. Space Racer is one of the lucky few, and his weapon does a whole lot more than taking out super powerful aliens. It can also shoot right through just about anything with crazy beams of power, and if anyone tries to take it from him, it'll end up right back in his hand. Pretty sweet, right? Plus, he's got a wicked space motorcycle, which is the reason behind his name. For ages, he would just whip through the galaxy. That is, until he fought Omni-Man and ended buried under rocks in an asteroid belt. 100 years after that fateful fight, Omni-Man returned with a new request and managed to yank Space Racer out of the rocks. He might not be the most outlandish character going, but where else are you going to find a space motorcycle riding, insanely powerful magic gunslinging green dude who can survive 100 years without food? Coming in at number 6, we've got D.A. Sinclair. Super smart Ivy League types tend to be a bit much, eh? Well, most folks in academia have nothing on D.A. Sinclair. He believes that human failings can be corrected through engineering and that folks can just be taken and changed into something else if it helps him achieve his goals. Of course, this leads him to kidnapping all sorts of folks and performing experiments on them in order to perfect his Reanimen. These recreated humans were mind controlled by Sinclair, with the first one ending up suicidal after realizing what it had become. Jeez, DA, did you have to do him like that? On top of being a genius-level intellect and a lunatic to boot, he actually ends up working with the good guys in the end, as his inventions are adopted by the Global Defense Agency, so I guess good on him. That still doesn't really make up for spitting in the face of the sanctity of human life, but hey, he essentially embodies the idea that if you're gonna make an omelet, you gotta crack a few eggs. Coming in at number 5, Alan the Alien. For years, folks on Earth assumed that Alan was an enemy. He would appear every 3 years or so and fight whoever came out of the woodwork. However, it didn't seem like he was down to kill anyone, and nobody could take him out themselves. Well, as it turned out, our one-eyed friend wasn't here just to fight a bunch of people, he was there to test the defenders of Earth, among other planets. After taking on Omni-Man for ages, he got to go head-to-head with Invincible. Instead of trying to end him though, Earth's greatest hope decided to talk with the extraterrestrial being. In doing so, they realized they had nothing to worry about when it came to dealing with each other. From then on, Alan proved to be an excellent friend and ally. He played a major role in all sorts of conflicts, especially when it came to dealing with the ever-dangerous Viltrumites. With all sorts of classic superpowers from insane strength, supernatural speed, healing abilities, and more, Alan is a force to be reckoned with. Plus, he has the innate ability to lead folks wherever he goes, which comes in handy. And to add in a little bit of extra fun, he's voiced by none other than Seth Rogen in the animated series. Nice. Coming in number 4, Science Dog. Hell yeah, just listen to that name, how can you not love it? Science Dog is exactly what he sounds like, a superhero dog with powers thanks to science. It's so simple, so beautiful. Funnily enough, Science Dog is a well-known comic in the world of Invincible. In fact, it was Mark's favorite superhero growing up, and there are plenty of references to our experimental canine throughout the comic. Even though he's a fictional character in this universe, and even ends up becoming Seance Dog in the Amazon adaptation, he does make an interesting appearance in the comics. An alien decides to disguise himself as the altered Scotty and contacts Mark, asking for help saving its planet. A great disguise for sure. So even though Science Dog in his actual canon comic form doesn't make any direct impact on the Invincible universe, there is plenty to enjoy about his presence. Coming in number 3, we've got Wolfman. Usually werewolves are portrayed as the bad guy. They stalk the night, hunting unsuspecting prey and howling at the moon. From time to time, they'll leave a poor sap alive who will at some point become a werewolf too. It's a classic horror tale for sure. There are exceptions though. Teen Wolf is one, those werewolves from What We Do in the Shadows could be another, and Wolfman could end up on that list too. Gary Hampton, CEO of Hampton Industries, was out camping with his family when what seemed to be a bear attacked him. He healed up pretty quick, and it became very apparent that he was a much more supernatural creature. Discovering that he was now a lycanthrope, Gary decided that instead of giving into primal instincts, he would use his newfound powers for good. For a while, he teamed up with a vampire named Zechariah, and eventually Wolfman found his way into the Invincible universe. That's right, after aiding Adam Eve in a fight, he joined forces with Invincible and a bunch of other heroes to take down the Emperor. Isn't that fun when things work out like that? Coming in at number 2, we've got Angstrom Levy. Just looking at this guy paints a pretty vivid picture, right? This is a mad scientist who has seen way more than he probably should have. He figured out that he had the ability to travel between parallel universes and worked up his proficiency over time. Eventually, he managed to find out about all the alternate Angstrom levies and recruited them in one way or another. Then, using the brain power of the Mahler twins, he had machines constructed that would download the knowledge of all its counterparts into his own brain. As it was happening though, Invincible crashed through the wall and started fighting the Mahlers. Levy hopped out of his machine to save Invincible, but that caused it to melt down. It exploded, and although the transfer was technically complete, Levy was horribly disfigured and his personality was irreversibly altered. Now he is a violent, super smart maniac with a hate-on for Invincible. Poor guy, but he kind of brought it on himself. And finally, at number 1, we've got Sequids. Parasitic alien cephalopods are never going out of style, are they? These creatures take over people's minds and then connect to a hive mind of sorts. Upon arriving on Mars, Invincible realizes that the human astronauts there are susceptible to these horrid little things' influence. They want nothing more than to conquer, which could be very bad news if they ever made it to Earth. However, as nasty and dangerous as they are, they're unable to bond with Martians or Viltrumites. So they're a big pain and cause a lot of problems for astronauts, but can't be too big of a threat, right?
Kicking off the list at number 10, comic book origins. Okay, Nolan Grayson is clearly not a regular person at all. He's introduced to us in the show as this Superman-like character voiced by J.K. Simmons, who does an amazing job. He made his first comic book appearance, of course, in Invincible issue 1 from Image Comics back in 2003 from the mind of Robert Kirkman. He comes from the planet Viltrum, and he's part of a race called the Viltrumites, who are these super-powered beings. All the dudes there are super jacked, and they have mustaches. Pretty awesome. I wouldn't fit in either department, actually. Now, this planet was quite brutal, but I'll get into that a little bit later on. Before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It's really helpful for our channel. You're the best. Thank you so much for watching. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get right back into this list. Number 9, the best father ever. Okay, when Nolan first arrived to Earth, he met Cecil Stedman. We're gonna start right at Earth, then we'll make our way back and explain some more as we go. He met Cecil Stedman. He taught him Earth cultures and all that jazz. So he adopted the name Grayson and tried to seem more of a human being. And then he eventually saved a woman named Debbie, fell in love, got married, the classic superhero beginnings. All he needs now is a 9-to-5 and a pair of glasses, and he's well on his way. So he eventually took on the name Omni-Man thanks to Cecil's help, and a superhero costume designer, Art Rosenbaum, came in to complete the picture. And he started to save the day while doubling as a super husband. Eventually, Debbie and Nolan gave birth to a child, this child being Mark. So while he was fighting crime, going toe-to-toe with supervillains, Nolan eventually would meet up with this superhero team, the Guardians of the Globe. Now, he didn't join them per se, but he worked alongside them on various missions. He told everybody a backstory about how he arrived to Earth, including Debbie, but there were some lies sprinkled in. But who are these Guardians of the Globe? Let's talk about them.
Number 8. Origins. Amanda got her powers from a curse. While on a trip to Europe, she fell in love with a boy whose grandmother did not approve. His grandmother also happened to know a thing or two about magic. After witnessing her grandson and Amanda getting busy, she placed a curse on the girl using a strand of her hair. I feel like if someone were gonna curse me using a strand of my hair, that would be like way too easy because I shed like crazy. I have so much hair. So yeah, note to self, do not let any magic users near any place I've ever been in, because they could definitely curse me. On the plane ride home, Amanda learned of this curse that was placed on her, not sure really what to make of it at first or what had caused it initially. She didn't really understand what was going on yet. She transformed into a hideous monster who also appeared to be male. Initially, Amanda had trouble controlling her transformations, but eventually she managed to change at will and turn the curse into a kind of superpower that she would use to fight crime. Number 7. Powers. Amanda's powers are pretty awesome. She's basically like a female Hulk. Well, a female, I guess, / male Hulk? Monster Girl is so named because she has the power to transform into a super strong male monster. While in this form, she is super strong and durable, and the younger she appears, the bigger and stronger her monster form is. I say this because not only does the curse mean that she has this monster form, which, as I mentioned earlier on, was harder for her to control, but also because anytime she transforms, when she returns to her human form, she's actually younger than she was previously. Effectively, each transformation causes her to de-age, depending on the amount of time she spent in her monster form. In the animated series, she explains that she is actually in her 20s, but just appears as a young girl because of this part of her curse. She actually used to go by Monster Woman, but had to change her name to Monster Girl as she appeared more and more younger, and it was kind of getting weird and confusing to call herself Monster Woman, or to explain to people like what was going on. Number 6. Most powerful form. Amanda makes the joke in the animated series that unless Robot wants a baby on the team, she cannot do 3 drills a day as part of her Guardians of the Globe training. This is when he first learns of the curse that is her powers and the de-aging effect that they have when she uses them. By the end of the series, we do see Monster Girl participating in training alongside the rest of the team in drills where they face off with one another. Which could mean that, I don't know, we might get to see her kicking butt as a baby in the show. I mean, probably not, just based on where we know the main story goes. But if that was a thing, why would it be so cool, you might be wondering, if you haven't read the comics? Well, the younger her human form appears, as I said earlier, the more powerful and gigantic her monster form is. In the comics, we actually meet an alternate version of Monster Girl who has regressed to her human baby form. And it's here that she actually is her most strong, her most powerful, while in her monster form. As a baby, she transforms into a Godzilla-like monster when it comes to power levels and mass. Number 5. Alternate realities. That isn't the only alternate version of Monster Girl that we've seen, actually. In issue 34 of Invincible, Mark ends up traveling through other dimensions during his fight with the reality-hopping villain, Angstrom Levy. As a result, when Mark finally defeats Levy, he ends up stranded in another dimension. However, in this dimension, Mark's heroic friends show up to help him. Their version of Mark actually disappeared 15 years ago, going to fight Levy, but then never returning from that battle. So this version of the heroic band of friends is older by 15 years. Monster Girl herself is also part of the team that shows up. We only see her in her monster form, but here in the future, or just in the dimension in general, she sports a different costume. We don't know much about these versions of our heroes or like what inspired the change to Monster Girl's costume. The color scheme for it here appears to be black, yellow, and white. Or is that dark blue? I can never tell. I think it's black. And you'll notice that Monster Girl doesn't seem to be sporting the belt she acquires later on in the main reality. Number 4, belt. Speaking of that belt, because of the complications that come with Amanda's powers, she of course typically uses her powers pretty sparingly. That is until Robot ends up constructing a belt for her that helps to compensate for the effects of her curse. The belt works by taking and storing a copy of her DNA before she transforms, preventing her from reverse aging when she transforms back into her human self. Yay! Truly, this would likely be a super useful gift for Monster Girl, allowing her to keep aging as opposed to constantly worrying about appearing younger and younger and younger still, even as her mind gets older. Although I'm sure some people would see that as not as much of a curse. Some people would probably be like, yay, I get younger. Though I do feel like if you're like a child, but you have like the age of someone who's in their 20s or 30s or something like that, that would be pretty weird. Number 3, aging is weird. Because Amanda was so used to de-aging for so long and being stuck in the body of a young girl for so long, she actually found it really weird when she was an adult permanently all the time. Amanda loved being an adult, but still found the changes to her body kind of hard to adapt to at first. She once commented that despite the fact that she had years to get used to returning to her adult form permanently, she doubted she would ever get used to her boobs, which she exclaimed kind of got in the way. It must be really interesting to be trapped in the body of a kid and then go back to being a grown woman, but then also having her male form when she's a monster. Honestly, I also think Amanda is a really cool hero because she's kind of a character that perfectly embodies that like exploration of both the masculine and feminine and like those parts of your psyche, but with superpowers. I think the exploration of masculine and feminine when we talk about like ourselves is so interesting. Anyways, I think philosophy is cool and exploration of self is cool. Number 2, Robot. In the comic series, Robot and Monster Girl have a very close relationship. They actually end up even falling in love and ruling an empire together. Which empire? The Flaxen Empire, if you can believe it. Amanda and Rudy, aka Robot, found themselves trapped in the Flaxen dimension after responding to another invasion attempt of theirs. They spent hundreds of years in the Flaxen Empire, aging very slowly, and eventually ended up taking over and ruling side by side. Eventually, Amanda would be the one to convince Robot that they should return home, though initially they had seemed happy to stay there and rule. Although things also were a lot more, they were there for a while, so it got really complicated as well. Number 1, her son. Amanda and Robot would not stay together during their whole time in the Flaxen Empire, of course not. It even took them a long time to come together romantically while they were there. And even while they were in love, they would have arguments and disagreements about how best to rule that would ultimately tear them apart for a time. During that time, Amanda had a relationship with one of the Zaxel twins. Now, the Zaxels had been the royal family before Amanda and Robot had taken over the Flaxen Empire. In her monster form, which is, like I said, 100% male, Amanda mated with Zal, who ended up becoming pregnant with her child. Monax was her and Zal's son together, but Amanda would not find out about his existence until she had returned home to Earth when Monax showed up to invade with the Flaxen Empire as an adult, attempting to get revenge on Robot and Monster Girl for all they had done to the royal family, and on Amanda, technically his father, for abandoning him. Number 10, Machine Head. Machine Head may have been defeated in season 1 of the animated series and in the comics, but you have to admit he put up a surprisingly good fight, especially for a villain whose name is as lame as Machine Head. Machine Head has, well, a machine for a head. His robotic head allows him to easily get upgrades, which is what enables him to almost defeat the Guardians of the Globe, Invincible, and Titan. Although, to be fair, Titan pretty much bails soon after the battle turns against their favor because, I mean, well, he has other plans. Machine Head had, well, basically a probability chip installed, which in essence allows him to see the possible futures. This means that he was prepared for the potential attack of Invincible and the Guardians, and even managed to use his wealth and connections to get a ton of villains to join him, including Battle Beast, who almost single-handedly kills everyone, but gets bored of the fight, leaving early, seeing the heroic opponents as pretty much below him. Number 9, Debbie Grayson. I know some of you might be throwing a fit over me including Debbie here, but honestly, she is one of my top favorite characters, and after what everyone just witnessed her go through in season 1 of the animated series, especially in that finale there, I feel like she deserves a spot on this list. Debbie is the mother of Mark and is the human wife of Omni-Man. If you, like me, were terrified for her during the animated series because of how human she is, you can breathe a sigh of relief that she made it through safely. Whew, she made it through season 1, friends. Despite being human and therefore pretty fragile, Debbie is a fearsome character who is not afraid to confront her husband Nolan with the truth when she discovers that he was responsible for the deaths of the Guardians of the Globe and has been hiding it from her and everyone. Also, if we are talking about emotional and mental resilience here in terms of power, Debbie is one of the most powerful characters that I know. She has been to hell and back mentally and still manages to keep going. Perhaps at times broken, but never defeated.
Number 8, Guardians of the Globe. If you're new to Invincible comics, maybe you've never read them before, but you know that it's on Amazon Prime, and maybe you wanted to try it out, see how it is, see what the buzz is all about, you were probably pretty shocked how that first episode ended. Even if you knew about it, it happens quite earlier in the show, earlier than it does in the comics, that's for sure. So creator Robert Kirkman himself explained what happened by saying this. Having it move up, we do get an extra sense of like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Debbie has no clue what's going on with her husband, and how is she going to find out, / if she finds out. Yeah, Omni-Man straight up destroys the Guardians of the Globe. He calls them all to meet up, and then once they're there, he just picks them off one by one. It's absolutely disgusting. It's so gory, it's awesome, but it's so gory and so evil. And the group members resemble the Justice League a bit, and actually they're all voiced by Walking Dead alumni, which is quite fun. So we have War Woman, we have Green Ghost, Martian Man, Red Rush, Darkwing, Immortal, and Aquarius. They're all introduced to us in a cool fashion and then gone, just like that. Wild. But now we gotta go back and talk about Mark. We gotta go talk about his son a bit. Number 7, Mark. So we pick up in the show Invincible with, of course, Invincible, voiced by Steven Yeun. Now he's just a normal high school student at this point, 17 years old, he gets bullied a tad, he's nervous to talk to girls, the whole thing. But with his father being Omni-Man, he too has the blood of the Viltrumite race flowing through him, which means superpowers. As soon as he discovered his father was Omni-Man, he was 7 years old, and he dreamt of being a superhero just like him. Maybe not too much like him, let's hope. So one day, Mark found out that he was eventually gonna get these superpowers, so he would wait every day. And finally, when he was taking out the trash, he accidentally tossed the second bag a bit too hard, and it turned into space debris quickly. So here we go, time for powers, let's go, this is a good thing. Number 6, tough love. Now, when you become a superhero, just like your father, that sounds like a great time, on paper. I mean, they're playing super catch, they're bonding, it's awesome. But what makes us get a sense of, oh, is when Norman really starts to hurt Mark. While Mark's going through training and getting used to his powers, what he can and can't do, Norman starts punching him really hard. At one point, he punches the wind out of him. And Mark's shocked at first. He's like, why did you just do that? Like, that really hurt. He treats him almost like he's not his son for a minute, but then he kind of snaps back into it. He does this in order to protect him. He says nobody out there is ever gonna pull their punches, so you gotta get used to that now, right from the beginning. Now, this upsets Mark at first, because it's all new and shocking to him, but when that bully comes back around later on in school, Mark demands him to punch him numerous times as hard as he can. He wants to know what he can take, what he's really capable of. So he does, and it does nothing. So now he's slowly becoming invincible. This is a big stepping stone. So the training is helping, that's awesome. It's getting him used to the super life, but is this still the best way to get trained by your father in this dark, brutal way? I mean, Mark has no idea it's about to get so much worse. Number 5, true homeworld. In issue 11 of Invincible, Nolan explains more of his backstory, but this time he doesn't hold back on the past. He explains the truth to his son. Yes, he is from Viltrum, but it's not exactly how you think. See, when they decided that in order to obtain intergalactic dominance, they have to eliminate the weakest links. And I'm not talking about a couple of people, I'm talking about half the population, Thanos style. It was a mess. All that was left were the strongest warriors, so they figured, okay, step 2, let's just go conquer other planets as well. So they needed to find planets that were far along where it's actually worth it to conquer them and add them to the Empire, but not too strong where they could overcome their defenses, right in that little sweet spot, little evil sweet spot. And then Omni-Man and Smethers would go down to the planet and be like, hey, if you're cool, then we're just gonna take your planet real quick and you can have our tech. Deal? Awesome. And some planets would agree, some planets would let them run it, but the planets that didn't agree and didn't allow this, well, they didn't really have a choice. Number 4, less than 50. Omni-Man's true arrival to Earth was also different than he first made it seem. A virus was wiping out the Viltrumite population, and they were down to less than 50, and Nolan was among them. But the Empire now had a different strategy. They couldn't keep taking over planets, numbers were too low, so instead, the Empire decided to use their long lifespan and infiltrate those societies first and weaken the chance of the resistance. Like maybe suiting up and pretending to be a hero named Omni-Man. Perhaps, maybe something like that. So Nolan was one of the first chosen for this task, to keep an eye on Earth, make sure they cannot resist, and it was up to Nolan to do whatever he wants for the 500 years while he was going to be there. Now after 500 years, all that knowledge collected would be used to eventually take over the planet under Viltrum's ruling. But that kind of changed for a bit once Nolan met his future wife. Number 3, he has a human connection. So as soon as Nolan arrived in the 80s, he saved that woman's life, Debbie, that I mentioned earlier. Now the same woman he would fall in love with and have Mark with. It was love at first sight. So now his motive times were starting to change at this point. Kind of. He knew he at least wanted to enjoy his time and live as a human, so he lied about his mission with the Viltrumite Empire, and instead he told Debbie and later on Mark that he was sent to advance human technology and protect the Earth from other dangerous aliens. So he lied, started out being a boring old human being, and while some concepts were new and exciting, he started to suit up and fight alongside Earth's other mightiest heroes. But he was well beyond them, of course, being Omni-Man. So it didn't take long for him to start enjoying these things, and eventually he ran into the superhero team, well, you know that team, the one I mentioned earlier, the Guardians of the Globe. But we know how that turned out. Number 2, father and son time. So all this backstory, all these lies, the brutal backstabbing Nolan did to the Guardians of the Globe, now what? Well, when Nolan saved a carnival from a monster, he had the misfortune of running into one of these Guardians of the Globe. Turns out one of them's still alive. The Immortal is, well, yeah, he's immortal. He comes back demanding answers for that mess that he made with the team earlier. Omni-Man is even impressed. He says he has no idea how he survived, but he should have stayed dead. So when Mark sees this on TV, he shows up to offer his dad help, shocked as well at what's going on. He has no idea what to even think of this. So Omni-Man believes that his mother is little more than a pet, because of the difference in the lifespan. How brutal is that? You show up to help your dad and offer some backup, and then you get this bomb dropped on you. So now Nolan has fully flipped. He's trying to convince Mark to look at the bigger picture here. Well, he doesn't really give him a choice. And finally, number 1, he's the worst father ever. So as if it couldn't possibly get any worse, Mark tells his dad to beat it, get out of here, his plan sucks, and there's no way that can possibly happen. He doesn't even believe it. He doesn't care if he lives 1,000,000 years. This is his home, and he's not letting Nolan, his father, destroy it. And the following issue is just an ultimate beatdown from father to son. This is like the training montage, but times 1,000. It's just brutal. And while he's beating up his own son, he's doing a villain monologue. He's like, look at this mess. One punch from us, and 1,000 of these weak human beings lose their lives. So right after he gets tossed through a building, Nolan tells Mark his mother never meant anything to him. Brutal. And then bam, they crash through the subway, more insults coming in hot. He doesn't give a damn about anybody on this planet. They mean nothing to him. Bam, just a mighty beatdown / roast. And finally they take it to the sky, and Nolan straight up leaves. He leaves Earth. He said he'd rather see the planet burn than spend another minute living amongst us. He even tells Mark whatever, he can produce more offspring, no big deal, bye, peace out. Now before he leaves, he does pull one punch back right after Mark calls him dad one last time.